Donald Trump recently came to my state. He held a rally in Portland, Maine, where he addressed a crowd of 2,000 supporters. At this point, we were right at the beginning of the general election campaign, and already Trump had hijacked the news cycle with his latest controversies. As usual, his remarks made headlines, and as usual, it didn't seem to matter. Trump's nonsense is so routine that we've become numb to it, and each time we run to our corners and start yelling. So I finally got fed up with it. I went to Trump's rally in an effort to better understand his supporters, and also because part of me still didn't believe Trump could possibly be as bad as he seems. Long story short, yes, he is that bad, but it's complicated, and I'd like to focus more on what I learned about Trump's supporters than what I learned about Trump himself. See, in order to get into the event, I had to spend 3 hours waiting outside in line, and another 3 hours inside waiting for Trump to show up. And during that time, I had a lot of opportunities to talk with his supporters. I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, and I'm going to be voting for Hillary Clinton in the general election. But I made up my mind ahead of time not to tell anyone that. To anyone who asked, I was just another undecided voter. I planned to keep to myself, I had no intentions of protesting, and I didn't wear any Trump paraphernalia. I thought I might seem suspicious or out of place in the crowd, but in reality, most people I talked to were really friendly. Some were eager to convince me to vote for Trump, others were curious about the issues and policies that were important to me. As the conversations wore on, I began to realize that these people weren't the fanatics I had seen on CNN. They were just people. The longer we talked, the more common ground we found. It was only when the news crews and the protesters showed up that the mood began to turn hostile, and I began to recognize some of that familiar aggression and defensiveness. Inside the event, I realized very quickly that a Trump rally has practically nothing to do with policy. It has everything to do with inviting an audience to participate in a collective emotional expression. It's not about healthcare or taxes or income inequality, it's about catharsis. And when you add Trump into that mix, that energy turns into tribalism. Repeatedly throughout his speech, Trump was interrupted by protesters. This has become a routine at his events. Some protesters actually chose to stand silently holding pocket constitutions. This was clearly inspired by Khizr and Ghazala Khan, the parents of a US soldier killed in Iraq, and I thought it was a stroke of genius.
I will gladly lend you my copy.
The good news is, I've never been so proud of my state as when we're getting thrown out of a Trump rally. The bad news is, this doesn't seem to be accomplishing anything. Trump's supporters seem to be infuriated and emboldened by protesters, which ultimately helps Trump. He preys on people's frustrations and fears, some of which are legitimate. Vote for me and make America great again, as if it could possibly be that simple. Trump's entire campaign boils down to one big fill in the blank. His remarks are designed to gin up paranoia and anger while being vague enough to avoid taking personal responsibility for the consequences. This is what allows Trump to continually get away with the crazy things he says, and the news media continue to fall for it. Notice how none of this has any connection to the real issues. While we're busy arguing about what Donald Trump meant, or whether he was being sarcastic, or watching protesters getting thrown out of his rallies, we're not talking about Trump's policies. We're not talking about income inequality or campaign finance or any of the other problems that actually matter. While it's understandable to be outraged by Trump's remarks, at some point we have to move beyond outrage and bring the conversation back to the issues. By now, Trump's supporters know exactly who he is. Most of them even agree he's unfit to be president, and they still support him. Racist, misogynist, narcissist, lunatic, egomaniac, it's all true, but that's not the point. The point is this. How desperate would you have to be to support Donald Trump in spite of all that? Until we start addressing the policy concerns underlying that desperation, we won't be getting at the root issue. So what if, instead of relying on the same criticisms of Trump that have proven time and time again to be ineffective, we tried a new approach? I guess it comes down to this. If you want to defeat Trump, reach out to his supporters. Engage with them on a policy level. Ask them if they know Trump's plan for Social Security or tax reform. And if all else fails and you need to take the fight to his rallies, don't stoop to his level. Stand in silent protest with a pocket constitution in your hands. You may still get thrown out, but even if you only reach one person out of thousands, it's still worth it. Because if there's one thing I learned from a Trump rally, it's that we're never going to fix what's wrong with this country until we stop yelling and start listening to each other again. We may agree on more than we think. So be the person who takes that first step. Listen, then speak.